Dr. Mark Jangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to mention a crazy idea concerning cash and decentralized currencies. And before I mention it, one of the things that in addition to things like aloof and there's certain kinds of principles and not getting too attached to the tool that you use as a researcher or as a scientist or even as an artist, one of the kinds of advice that I used to give my students in terms of coming up with ideas and so that you're maximally creative was to have a very low threshold for writing down your ideas. I mean, so in my notebooks, when I'm looking for new ideas, I really have a very low threshold. It takes the stupidest idea of all I'm willing to write down, and I want that notebook messy and ugly so that I don't feel like it's this special tablet upon which I am writing and I have to wait for the idea to be completely formed before I write it. No, that's just going to destroy your ability to come up with great ideas because you're going to have to come up with 100 or 1,000 stupid ideas before you end up with the right stupid idea, which is just crazy and turns out to be true and exciting and surprising, and you can actually get data for it and so forth. So many constraints. So you really want to have a low threshold. And so I wanted to mention a crazy idea, but it's in the context of a general issue. Much of the drive away from centralized banking towards decentralized currencies, cryptocurrencies, is to get the government out of prevent the government from mucking with our affairs. And for a lot of folks, it may have sounded very academic and weird and techie, but I think over the last year, especially with in the specific case of Canada, accessing and taking the accounts of all of these leaders of the Freedom Truckers movement in Canada. So suddenly the government just says, okay, we'll just freeze all of your accounts and thereby stop your ability from existing in life. And so now you have the government that's able to prevent freedom of speech, free assembly, and so forth by just threatening thus doing. But the threat is enough to stop most people from assembling and carrying out their demonstrations if they're worried about that happening. So how do you get, so a lot of people now, it's no longer academic to get their currency in a way that's away from the government. And so cryptocurrency has been the exciting sort of weird topic that a lot of people don't fully understand, that allows currency to sit out there in public, but not to be centrally controlled by any bank or any government that can then take control of it. It's distributed across tens of thousands of computers all over the world, and there's so it's distributed, and there's no centralized group that's in control of it. Now, of course, we've had something like cryptocurrency in those respects, that is, it being decentralized and distributed over space as well, and it's just called cash, and that's what we had for thousands of years. We had just physical tokens that stood for, and were hard to reproduce. Hopefully they're not. So that's what cash is. And so there's been a lot of strong pushback for people to go back to cash, and because it has all these great advantages of being out of the ability for the government to control it, and if you just do all of your and to be tracked and all of the kinds of things that we're worried now, where you can be tracked on the basis of your phone, everything that you do. So people are saying, look, I want to go to cash. Now here's the crazy idea. One of the problems with cash is that while it has all of these great things, it's decentralized, it's distributed, and it comes for free by virtue of just being physical tokens. It just sort of happens for free that way. Is that if I have a lot of cash, well, it can be stolen, right? And the nice thing about cryptocurrency is that in principle it can't be stolen. But of course, cryptocurrency is being stolen all the time. I mean, and people are losing their accounts by forgetting there's all kinds of fraud going on. But in the long run, you can imagine things being such that cryptocurrency is actually hard to steal. Whereas you can sort of see how cash is inherently just easy to steal. A whole bunch of stuff is sitting under my blankets, or what do you call it, the thing that we sleep on, and someone could just come in there and break in and steal it all. So here's the crazy idea. It's getting easier and easier to build microchips, tiny little chips that are placed in the world of objects, the internet of objects around us. And imagine having one in each $100 bill or $1,000 bill. It might have to be larger bills for this to work, such that the only way that it keeps track of who the owner is at any given time, and the way that it it knows that I'm the owner because I did a transaction earlier with you and you gave it to me. And so in order to transact a bill from one person to another, both people have to hold it at the same time. And because emotional expressive software has advanced sufficiently, either by virtue of it seeing some kind of emotional signals on the face or reading, something about the nature of your body upon touching it, you can then see whether or not the transaction is occurring voluntarily, that you've consented to give that money over, and not through coercion or fear. So now, of course, we're still far away from having that kind of technology, but you can potentially see how that actually, we're getting to the point where maybe that's possible. That's not nearly as crazy sounding as it seems. So you could have, it's still not the case that a centralized government would be able to know who a particular $1,000 bill belongs to from afar. But once you get that $1,000 bill, it might then have a record of whose it is now. And if it was the case that it had been stolen from somebody, then it'll still have the old owner, and you'll be unable to spend it because in order to spend it, you'll have to show that you in fact activate it because it's showing your identity or your fingerprint relative to that thing. So this is just a crazy idea I thought I'd throw out there, partly from my own memory, partly for other brighter tech folks that can say, yeah, actually, we may be able to hawk up something kind of like that now as a prototype on some kind of simple materials. And I think it can be motivating just to get these ideas out there rather than sitting on loads and loads of ideas for years that are never going to go anywhere and will die with me. Not that it's a great idea, but it's a crazy idea that I'm hoping gets folks thinking. And if we are to return to cash, which I think is a great idea to return to cash, because we should never be comfortable with the power that the state inevitably accrues and then forces banks, centralized banks, to potentially, it'll just abuse those powers. If we want to go back to cash, there are potentially tremendous new kinds of innovations that we can do with cash that makes it safer and is more useful to us, and including potentially not being able to be stolen, that nevertheless keeps all of the decentralized and distributed properties that we want to have cash for in the first place. And that was your science moment.